Hello and welcome. I am happy to give you a few tips here today that will help you become a better writer and a better public speaker. As a matter of fact, my wish for you is that you will become a great writer and a great public speaker. A young aspiring writer once asked me, he said, "Sir, you have such a powerful narrative and descriptive ability that when I read your writings or listen to you speak, it is as good as watching a movie or following real life events. How did you develop such a powerful writing and speaking ability?" Now that's a very good question. I looked at this young man carefully and I could see in his eyes that he was expecting a magical formula, a sort of an abracadabra that will confer on him that ability in an instant. But I knew better than that. There are no such quick fix all, instant formulas. I'm afraid a lot of time and energy goes into developing these very useful skills. Now, before I go ahead and emphasize the things that I pointed out to this young man, things that every aspiring writer and public speaker needs to know and work on to become and do better, let me say here that the ability to write and speak very well are two of the most important abilities that all young people, regardless their area of interest or endeavor in life, should have. You see, the ability to write and speak well increases your connectivity to the rest of the world, and with that, your value and marketability, eventually positively impacting on your productivity and profitability. Simply put, the ability to write and speak well greatly increases your chances of success in life and profession, regardless your location or your profession. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. If you are a good writer and a good speaker, it makes you, those skills, writing and speaking skills, makes you better at whatever it is that you do. Now, I pointed out to this young man that first of all, you must be a very good observer. And I want to point it out to you. You want to be a good writer and a good public speaker. You must, first of all, be a very good observer with a good presence of mind. Do not miss or ignore anything, no matter how small or insignificant. Secondly, you must be a good listener. It pays more to shut up your mouth and listen. Speak only when you need clarification on some point. You learn more that way, and such learning gives your writing and speaking added weight and punch. Thirdly, learn to pay attention to details and keep records of incidences, sequences, and consequences. What I mean by this is keep a sharp mind. In other words, use all your senses in all situations and at all times. Be mindful in all situations and at all times. Do not allow any detail to pass you by unnoticed and uncaptured. In other words, master all environments and situations you find yourself in. Fourthly, and this is the nitty-gritty that most aspiring writers and speakers want to avoid, practice recounting events, even if it's an imaginary event, in long handwriting. I am not talking about you sitting down and writing for publication. No. I am talking about writing long and hard, correcting spellings and rephrasing sentences just for practice. Do the same with speaking. Verbalize what you have written over and over again, paying close attention to certain technicalities. Firstly, pay close attention to your pronunciation. See, correct pronunciation is an important key to effective speaking. Always pronounce words deliberately and correctly. Avoid slangs and strict pronunciation. Every language has its accent. Always use the recognized accent of the language you are speaking. In other words, speak Hausa like a Hausa man, speak Igbo like an Igbo man, speak Yoruba like a Yoruba man, and speak English like an English man. Now, the second technicality you need to pay attention to when you're practicing speaking is pace. The main requirement for effective speaking is intelligibility. If you are not understood, your thoughts are not conveyed. And if you are to be understood, then you must speak at a pace that enables your listeners to get your message, just like I'm doing in this lesson. So strive to be unhurried, measured, and not frantic. Avoid speaking too fast. Rapid fire speech is not an acceptable form of regular and good communication. Avoid speaking too slow. Slow motion speech is also not an acceptable form of regular and good communication. The third technical thing you need to pay attention to is your pauses. Pauses. Everyone pauses from time to time in the course of giving a talk. Now, what you need to do in your pausing is to avoid hemming or using the all-purpose or its cousin. A lot of time people talk and in a single sentence they go like oh, and it fills up the entire space in their speech, and it's not good at all. So avoid hemming. Also avoid bogging down in mid-sentence. Use breathing to fill in spaces instead of hemming or bogging. Now, pause for a few seconds and collect your thoughts. Then carry on confidently, measuredly, and smoothly. As far as this is concerned, I can only tell you to practice and practice and practice some more. You want to be a good writer, you must practice writing. You want to be a good public speaker, you must practice speaking. Over and over and over again. Make it a habit to practice when you are away from the public, when nobody is looking at you. That's the right time to practice how to pronounce words. That's the right time to practice how to write good, sharp, crisp sentences. So work at it. Practice and practice and practice. Now, as I was talking with this young man, I mentioned to him the endless stack of exercise and notebooks in my study, containing writings that will never be published because they represent endless hours of mental practice and exercise. I also mentioned the countless times I stood in front of a full-length mirror in my room and blew endless spoken English at myself. I also formed the habit of walking to the farms and bushes on the edge of Numan town where I grew up and shouting sentences into the air, punctuated only by the sweet chorus of the birds. It was not a waste of time. No. My descriptive and narrative powers, both in writing and in speech, were developed and honed during those long hours of exercise and practice. Let me add here that confidence is important in becoming a successful writer and public speaker. No matter how much you practice writing and speaking, if you are not confident to present to the public what you have written, or stand up and speak before an audience and be critiqued, then all your effort is wasted. It is never easy for first-timers, but, and this is very important, the more you present your work and speak publicly, the more confident you will become. So overcome your initial fear, present your work to the public, and you will be on your way to success. Now, before I conclude, I need you to understand a few things. If you are an aspiring writer or public speaker, hoping to follow my example, I just shared with you some of my secrets for free. But I need you to note, and it is important for you to note this, it is important that I emphasize it. The ability to write and speak clearly are among the topmost skills that every youth should have, regardless their primary professional interest or preoccupation. I've said this earlier, I'm just emphasizing it. You see, ever since paper and pen were invented and the first public colloquiums were organized, writing and public speaking have not diminished in value. Even with the coming of the World Wide Web and the growth of information and communication technology, basic writing and basic public speaking skills remain hugely relevant and will remain so as long as human beings exist. This is so because communication is a basic human need. I don't know whether you've thought about it, but without the ability to communicate, there won't be community and all the interactions and engagements that community entails. In other words, human existence would be impossible without the ability to communicate. So I encourage you to get down to practicing because you will need these skills for the rest of your life. Let me give you let me leave you with two quotations that I find very helpful. The first is on writing, and the second is on public speaking. These quotations are by people who are well experienced and therefore know what they are talking about. You will find useful hints that will help improve your game in these quotations. The first quotation is by Richard Burke. Richard Burke said, and I quote, "A professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit." In other words, the bridge between being an amateur and eventually becoming a professional is not to quit. There will be frustrating moments. There will be time when your work will be looked down upon. There will be times when you will be despised. All kinds of challenges will come along. But keep writing, and rephrasing those sentences. Keep working at becoming a better writer. Eventually, you will grow from an amateur to a professional. The second quotation is by Alexander Gregg. Alexander Gregg. There are three things to aim at in public speaking. First, to get into your subject. Then, to get your subject into yourself, and lastly, to get your subject into the heart of your audience. This is about a public speaking. Again, it brings us back to practice because that's how you get your subject into yourself. By practicing and practicing and practicing, the subject matter, what you want to speak on, becomes part of you. And if it becomes part of you, just like eating, you do it naturally without struggling. So do that, and then work on making sure that subject does not only become part of you, but that you yourself, anytime you stand up, you do it so naturally that it eventually gets into the hearts of the people. Because if you do it naturally, the audience tend to flow a lot easily in accepting or following what you're saying. Everybody likes a great speaker, and great speakers are people who practice very well and master their subjects, and they can talk about it easily and with great conviction. So practice. I expect you to go ahead and do better than I have done. I expect you to go ahead and succeed in life. And it is possible. You can do it. It is all within you. I remain Agosobamei, your friend for a greater Nigeria and the best things of life. Now, by way of recap, I told you that these skills, writing skill and the speaking ability, are very important skills that every young man, regardless your profession, regardless where you come from, needs to have. I also showed you that to be a good writer and a good speaker, you must be a good observer, you must be a good listener, and you must learn to pay attention to details. In addition to that, I told you that the key to it all is practicing. Practice, practice, practice. Practice writing. Write a lot. You're going to write so many things, not because you want to publish it, but because you're practicing. Also practice speaking. And when you were practicing speaking, I told you to pay attention to pronunciation, pay attention to pace, pay attention to pauses. I also shared with you my experience of how I practiced endlessly in my room privately, standing before a full-length mirror, and how I go out to the open country at the outskirts of my hometown, Numan, and speak loud, correcting myself, adjusting my pace, adjusting my movements, practicing over and over and over. I used to stand there and imagine myself speaking to audiences across the world through radio, television, and I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and it became a part of me. So learn to practice. I also told you that it's important for you to have confidence. Have confidence in your writing and have confidence in your speaking abilities. That way you can present your writing to the public, or you can stand before an audience and speak. And if you lack confidence, you're going to fizzle out. You're not going to do well. So have confidence. Now I concluded by emphasizing to you that the ability to write and speak clearly are among the topmost skills that every youth should have, regardless their primary professional interest or preoccupation. I cannot overemphasize that. If you can write clearly and speak very well, it's an additional advantage for you to succeed in your profession. So every young man and woman should learn to write well and speak well. It gives you an added advantage over other professionals that you might be in the same field with. So it's very important. In fact, public writing and public speaking are subjects that should be taught in our schools. Unfortunately, here in Nigeria, we don't teach them in our schools. And that's why we have leaders, politicians, professionals, elites in various fields that can't speak well. They get up to speak and they fumble because they've not practiced this as young people. They've not been taught these skills while in school. I also gave you two quotations, one from Richard Bach. He said, "A professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit. So do not quit. Keep writing. You will grow from an amateur and become a professional." Then the second quotation was from Alexander Gregg. There are three things to aim at in public speaking. First, to get into your subject, know your subject. Then, to get your subject into yourself, make it a part of you. And lastly, to get your subject into the heart of your audience. Those three things are important for you to becoming a great public speaker. That quotation was by Alexander Gregg. So I expect you to go forward and do greatly in life. And I would like to end it here. My name still remains Agosu Hulade Obamei, your friend for Greater Nigeria and the best things of life.